Morning fellas, Ben back again on another video. Pardon the ambient noise. I have absolutely no control over it. I could have taken the video. I waited for a really long period of time, but then there's a motor, a generator that is working very close to me, and it creates this loud noise. Yep, today's video is something important, as you guys can see. Very important video. Kindly do not skip any of it, is because you will be skipping an important aspect of the information that I'm about to share. So for all of you guys who do a lot of off-road riding, or even if you don't do a lot of off-road riding and you've been riding the motorcycle for about 2 years, this would be a good time for you to go ahead and check all the nuts and bolts. Very important that you check these nuts and bolts by yourself. Do not expect the service center fellows to do this for you. They have a procedure called checking and retorquing all the factory bolts to spec. Every once in a while they're supposed to do that, but then I don't think, from my experience, I have never ever seen service centers do a very good job of it. Some fellas do, some fellas don't. It just boils down to the person, the technician. And the customer very rarely gets to know if it's been done or not. It's because they have not bothered to ponder over a subject like this. So when things go wrong is when you end up wondering what happened, why did the screw fall onto the ground, why did it come loose in the first place. So yeah, don't wait for something like that to happen. Do give the bike a thorough check every once in a while. And all you need to check if all your nuts and bolts are in good nick, if they are in the right torque, or if something is loose and all you need to go ahead and just go about adjusting it a bit, you need these tools. That's all there is to it. So to start with, to begin with, I have a mini ratchet, a quarter drive ratchet, and I have these sockets. The sockets are 12, 13, 10, 8, and this is an extension arm. All that you need to torque bolts. And I have a big socket, a two-way socket. This is a 17-inch for I'll come to that. And this is a two-way socket, a spark plug adapter, you could call it like that. So one side is 17 and the other side is 22. This is for the oil drain plug, and this is for your main axle nuts, front and rear. Again, a bunch of Allen keys, ranging from the smallest size to about as much as the motorcycle would need. This has pretty much 90% of all the Allen keys in it. A 10 and 12 open end spanner, a T, what do you call it, an Allen key but with a T handle. So this would be a size, where is it written? This I believe would be a size 4, and this I believe would be a size, I'm guessing 5. This would be a size 5 and this would be a size 4. And then a screwdriver, a Phillips end, and a flat end on the other side. Of course I can pull this out and the flat end is on the other side. An adjustable wrench, an adjustable wrench, more like a spanner but adjustable. And this is an extension arm. I use this as an extension bar for these Allen keys. So to get the right torque, I use this fellow. And then a larger ratchet with 24 millimeter nut to open the axle. An open end spanner, size 30 and 32. You need a size 30 for the steering stem nut to get the right torque. So that's all there is to it. That's the tools that you need to thoroughly check and retorque the bolts on the motorcycle. All of these bolts come loose, and like what you assume, you need to intervene at the right time. So 2 years is a good enough time for you to go ahead and start checking these bolts, the condition of these bolts. Or if you're into hardcore off-road riding, it's imperative that you check the condition of these bolts every now and then. I can't give you a certain time, a time period, but I can definitely say that you need to do this on a periodic basis. Maybe every second or third service that you do, if you're into hardcore off-roading, you could definitely go ahead and check the condition of the bolts. Yep, so to begin with, we have So this is just an accessory, but then again you have a bolt that holds the headlamp unit inside, which has about which is I believe this would be a 5 millimeter. So that's a 5 millimeter, and you go ahead and use this to torque the bolt inside. And well, if the factory bolt, this is not the factory bolt. The factory bolt might have one size bigger. So in that case, I believe you can use a 6 millimeter Allen key to go ahead and tighten the factory bolt inside. Very important area. Do not skip this. Yep. So the windshield screws, again, it depends on how it came on your motorcycle. If it was Allen key, you use a size 4 millimeter Allen key. If it wasn't, you can use, like mine, you can use a flat head to tighten. So that's the windshield nut. Coming to this part over here, this is a small plastic bracket that kind of conceals the wiring and the sockets, or the wiring boots, the wire boots. So you can use a 4 millimeter T-handle Allen key to tighten that nut. Now, most important, very important, the fork. The forks are held by triple clamps, and triple clamps cling on to the forks with these bolts. These bolts are called pinch bolts, and they kind of hold, they kind of squeeze the fork leg. The triple clamp kind of pinches onto the fork leg, and so it's very important that you have the right torque here, and that would be a size, this would be a size 6 millimeter Allen key to tighten these bolts on the upper triple clamp and on the lower triple clamp. Very important. Now, once it's fully seated and once you have it at arm tight, you can use an extension tool like this to go ahead and do another 1/4 of a turn or half a turn, depending on the feel. Do not keep cranking. Very important. Aluminium, so there's a very high chance of the thread getting stripped. So the right torque is something that you understand with time. Maybe take it to a mechanic and they'll do it for you. But this video is all about getting it to a decent torque. You know, if it's loose, just get it tight. And how tight can be dealt, by a trained mechanic, somebody who knows what they're doing. Or look at the service manual and look for the torque figures and get a torque wrench and do it yourself. Yep. So that's that. There you go. Knuckle guards, bark busters, and the likes of it. A size, I believe, 5 millimeter here, a size 4 millimeter here. What do I have here? This, interesting. This is where the mini ratchet comes in to play. So you get the mini ratchet. So yep, again, to keep the brake master cylinder unit in place. Very important. You might have had falls, crashes, and there's a very high possibility that this comes loose. So crank on these bolts. Again, be very careful not to overdo it. The threads will strip. So get it to the right torque and leave it at that. Take it to a mechanic. They'll be able to tell you if it's good enough or not, and learn from them. This bolt holds the subframe over here, over this crossbar, whatever. So another important area to go ahead and retorque, use a size 5 millimeter to tighten that bolt. And over here, the exhaust pipe and its studs. So very important that you kind of retorque these every now and then, just so that there is no leak from here. This will result in power loss, this will result in backfiring and so much of crap. Your bike will not run the way it is supposed to run. So this should be an absolutely sealed unit from here till about here. There should not be any leaks here as well. See to it that it's a very well sealed unit. And yeah, so go ahead and tighten these bolts with a 12 millimeter. I also have these steel caps on, so they too I believe are 12 millimeters. Anyway, so it's just like, no, the caps are 13 millimeters. So for that I use a socket. Anyways, so 12 millimeter nuts. Crank on both the sides. Very important that you crank on both the sides. Now, very important, coming to another very important area, that is getting the engine casing bolts, the side cases. And the bolts, they tend to come loose with time. Very important that you go ahead every once in a while and check for their tightness. So if you can't do it with a mini ratchet, then that's good enough. So if you try and crank it and doesn't budge, good enough. Some bolts will come loose. I have just gone ahead and done everything up, so I thought I should make a video only after I did it. But yeah, any which ways, this will definitely come in handy. Go ahead and check all these bolts, every single one of them. They are all 8 millimeter bolts. So use a mini ratchet and check all these bolts. There are at least 10 to 12 on one side. Plenty of bolts for you to check the self-starter motor and so on and so forth. You'll find these fellas a lot on your motorcycle, both the side cases put together. You'll have a lot to deal with. Take your time with this, go slow, do not over tighten. Again, very high chance of stripping the threads. Once you're done with the 8 millimeter bolts on one side, you can go ahead and crank on this. This is the bash plate, engine bash plate. So tighten these bolts as well. These are 10 millimeters. Engine bash plate. You have 2 here, you have 2 here, and you have 2 on the other side. Then you have the heat shield on the exhaust. So that again is a 10 millimeter. So 10 millimeter open end will take care of that, or a ratchet with a 10 millimeter socket. Coming to these are bed bolts. So you have one here, very important, this fella. So that would be a size, this would be a size 14 I believe. Yeah, so a size 14. Of course you can tighten it from the other side. There's a size 14 open end spanner here, and there's a size, this I believe is a size 13. Yep. Yeah, this is 13 millimeters or 12. Sorry, 12 millimeters. You have 12 millimeter bolts to be tightened over here, and you have, I believe, a 13 or a 14 millimeter over here. So keep that in check. And another fellow over here. We'll talk about this on the other side. Yep. So engine bed bolts, 1, 2, 3, and 4. There you go. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4, and there's 5. These are the places where, oh sorry, there's 5 over here. Over here, this is very important. I don't know if the camera is capturing it. Over here and not here, I'm sorry. This is for the frame, but this is for the engine over here. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, 4, and 5. 5 places where the engine mounts onto the frame, onto the chassis. So keep in mind that you need to go ahead and check the torque of all these bolts. Moving on from the engine to the body again. Yeah, nothing much. Plastic casing and Allen bolts. So there's a size 4. Torque these nuts. Moving on to the brake master cylinder, held on by 5 millimeter Allen keys. So that's that. The brake lever held on to the frame. There's a spring that controls the forward backward movement, but there's also a bolt that holds everything in place. This bolt holds the brake lever in place, and it's very important that you get the right torque on this one as well. So there's a nut on the other side, on the back side. You'll have to hold it. I don't really remember the size of the nut. I think it is about 15 millimeters, 15 or 16 millimeters. So you hold, or 17 millimeters. So you hold that nut and crank this up to a point where you still retain that up and down movement. If you tighten this, if you over tighten this, you may not be able to do this with your brake lever. It will get stuck. There will be a lot of friction, and so it will get stuck. So get the right torque and you will be able to do this. Just see to it that this is not loose, that your brake lever moves forward and backwards. It shouldn't shift like this. Well, if this brake lever is a little too loose and you have a fall and this lever gets caught up, it gets hooked onto something on the ground, particularly when you're riding off-road, there's a very high possibility that the brake lever can bend sideways. It can bend like that. So you need to go and look into your motorcycle if your brake lever is straight or if it's already bent. If it's bent, then that simply means that this bolt has been loose. Get it back to its position. That is by pushing it. This is simple mild steel, so it will bend very comfortably. And then you re-torque this nut or this bolt. Yeah, moving on to another heat shield, another 10 millimeter with a socket or an open end spanner. Coming on to the exhaust clamp, another 12 millimeters. So this is a 12 millimeter. You have another 12 millimeter nut on the back side. Hold that while you crank this and see to it that your exhaust is gripping, that your muffler is gripping onto the bent pipe really nicely and tight. Coming back to people who have the saddle stay, very important that you check the torque on this one. Okay, so that is this would be a size 6 millimeter, size 6 millimeter Allen key going in, and then the extension bar. So yeah, there you go. And coming back to this again, the muffler being held onto the frame over here. I believe this is a size 14 millimeter or size 13. It's a size 13. It's a size 13 millimeter, and on the back side you have a size 12, I believe. So tighten that as well. Also, another important area here, I missed this bit. This is for you to get the level of the brake pedal right. If it's way too down, then high chances that when you stand up and ride, you will barely be able to access your brake lever. Way too high, then every time you rest your feet, you're technically compressing the lever and the brakes are holding on to the wheel. So you do not want to the rotor. You do not want that to happen. You want it to be in the right place where when you rest your feet, you're not exactly pressing on the lever. But when it's important that you stand up and ride, you still are able to get the lever to grip your feet, so that you can press on it and use the rear brake to maneuver on soft terrain or rough terrain anyways. Yeah. So moving on to the rear wheel axle. The rear wheel axle is a size 24 socket with a ratchet, and these are adjuster nuts and locking nuts. Again, 12 millimeters for both of them. Remember, this whole side or the entire motorcycle is just a bunch of tools, a few tools, that's all there is to it. And again, another saddle stay bolt with a 6 millimeter Allen key. What else? The number plate Allen bolt. Very important that you see to it that your number plate is tight. Every single time you ride off-road, there's a very high chance that this can come loose, and I've had experiences where I've lost my number plate or it's hanging on one bolt. I really don't know how that happens, but it just somehow happens that the number plate comes loose. And so it's very important that you kind of lock tight this. You lock tight these bolts and see to it that the number plate is there. Okay, moving on to the rack and these bolts, these Allen key bolts. If you have a rack and if you have to maintain something, if you have to see the tension of the bolts, do check, go ahead and check. So with this, I have a size 4 millimeter. Again, the saddle stay, the rear half of the saddle stay, a size 10 millimeter for the bolts, an open end spanner, 10 millimeter or a socket to tighten this part. Coming to this part, a size 5 millimeter Allen bolts for the chain guard on the top. So this is for the chain not spraying lube and grease all over the top side of the motorcycle. So that kind of takes care of that. And then you have a size 10 millimeter bolt to again, this is also a chain guard for the lower side, so that rocks and things don't hit the sprocket and the chain over here. So this is not a chain guide, but it's more like a chain guard. So yeah, another 10 millimeter bolt on on both of these. Another important area is this fellow over here. Very important that you check this particular bolt. This particular bolt holds the gear lever in place. Comes loose if you do a lot of off-road riding, or even if you've been shifting for over a year or two. I mean, you've been using the motorcycle every day, and I mean, of course, you have to shift gears, right? So keep a tab on this, check this periodically, get the right tension over there. Adjusting this bolt over here, this is for the engine bed mount, and this is for the two parts of the chassis getting attached over here. So check these bolts for the torque. Another thing that you need to check periodically is this fellow, the side stand sensor. This kind of cracks, this breaks over here. I've changed two of them, so this breaks right over here. Get the torque right. If these bolts tend to become loose and you do this a lot, very high chance that you will end up breaking this. This is very, very low quality aluminum, and there's a very high chance that it will crack over here. So get the right torque on these bolts. Again, Loctite them if need be. Another area is to check this side stand bolt. I'm not sure if you guys can see it. There's a bolt over here, right over here. Yep, there you go. That's another 6 millimeter. So 6 millimeter Allen key. Get the right torque there as well, so that your side stand doesn't move a lot. I mean, of course it will move, but it shouldn't be moving a lot. There is a locking nut on the wrong side, on the back side of this. So if everything is well, if everything is nice and tight, that's good enough. Again, all the engine casing bolts, the 8 millimeter to crank up these bolts to the right torque. Another area where you can find oil leaks is this and here. So here you have 10 millimeter open end spanner. You can go ahead and tighten these areas, and then on top you have 8 millimeter open end spanners. So this is 8 millimeter open end spanner, 10 millimeter open end spanner, and the oil cooler. No, this would be a yeah, sorry, I forgot to get the right tool for this. This would be a size 15 or 14, not 14, this would be a 16 millimeters, right? So 16 millimeters would be this. No, yeah, anyways, this would be a size 15 or 16 millimeters. You need to go and check this. And then there is a size 17 for the oil drain nut or bolt, and another bed bolt over here, size 13 or 14. This would be a size 13. Yep, so that's a size 13 socket going there. And then what else on this side? There you go again, bash plate bolts, 10 millimeter open end spanner, 10 millimeter socket, your choice. That's a small clamp to hold the brake hose in place, size 10 millimeters. Very important, very, very important that you check your caliper. So these two are size 12 or 13. This is a size 13. Yep, so you have size 13 or 12. Let me just check, need to be doubly sure. Oh, so that's a size 12. This is a size 12 socket. So again, to tighten these bolts, very important that these bolts are tight, nice and tight. So again, the main axle is a size 24 24, not a 22, I'm sorry, this is a size 24. 24 here and 24 on the rear. Main axle nuts. Did I miss out on anything? Of course, the headlight cowl holds on to the headlamp assembly with these two screws on both sides, one here and one on the other side. A Phillips head for that, a Phillips head for this to adjust the windshield. Another very important area which usually goes unnoticed is these bolts. I don't know if you guys can see. I don't know if you guys can see a bolt here, right here. There you go. Can you see that? Can you see those bolts? Yep. There you go. Those fellas. There's one at the bottom and one at the top. You guys can see. One there, one here. Well, that kind of holds the subframe to the main frame, to the chassis, and these racks mount on to the subframe. So it's very important that you get this part right. That has to be really tight and very tightly held in place, so that these subframes, these racks hold onto that subframe well, and this is a sturdy structure. And so you have the headlamp and the windshield and the indicators and the speedometer, everything in I mean, you know that they're held well in place and nothing is going to be compromised the moment you hit the ground. It's very important that the subframe, clearly visible over here, that part is held tightly onto the frame. So that would be a size 6mm Allen key. You need to get that right, and when that is right, you can tighten the rails, these rails onto the subframe. All you need to do is just remove this. You will find a bolt here. You remove this part. By removing this screw, you can pull this out. You will find a bolt here. I think that's a 13mm or 12mm. You crank that tight, so that holds on to the subframe well. And then, of course, the speedometer and rubber grommets. So that's a size, the camera can capture it. Yep, there you go. That's a size 10mm nut. So you crank that so that you have a nice and firm speedometer. And if you run an easy clutch, this would be a size 1 or 2 Allen key. Tighten that. Knuckle guard, plastic guard. What else? Mirror and clutch lever perch. Another 10mm knuckle guard. Okay. The steering stem, steering stem nut, the lock nut. The lock nut is a size 30 open end spanner. So the right torque here will see to it that your motorcycle, the top end doesn't feel like it's clunking. Every time you hit a pothole, it doesn't clunk. So the right torque here is imperative, very important. And the adjuster nuts over here, all that they need to be is hand tight, nice and tight by hand. This is where you go ahead and tighten it really well. Okay, so again, if you use risers, it's very important that you keep checking the tension on these bolts. This would be a size 6mm, and on the triple clamp you have another 6mm over here. So I believe that kind of sums it up. If you also have a windshield extender, a size 4mm Allen key over there. The fork stabilizers, you have a size 5mm. I believe it's a size 5mm Allen key over here. Okay. Oh, missing out on all these. Another bolt, another nut to be taken care of, so that it holds this fella in place. The guide for the clutch cable. So that would be a size 14mm nut. Oil cooler, screws and nuts, 12mm, 8mm 6mm or 5mm Allen key, and Yeah. Well, that's the whole of it. Look at the mess that I've made. Oh, there's another one that I missed over here. That's a size, I believe that's a size 5mm or 6mm Allen key pinch bolt so that it holds on to the axle over here. And then you go ahead and tighten the axle nut. Well, that kind of sums it up. Hopefully this helped. Yep, so that was the idea behind this video. Kindly put it to good use. Kindly get these tools. Buy these tools. There's lots of better tools to do this job. And it's not that I have the best tools with me. I am just a random DIY guy, and I use whatever it is that I have with me. I kind of improvise every single time. So go ahead and get these tools, or go ahead and get better tools, the right tools, get a tool kit, whatever works for you, and then put it to good use. Maintain your motorcycles. As long as you do that, the bike will be very, very happy. It will reward you with fantastic experiences. Nothing beats motorcycling, nothing. No ride in a luxury car compares to a ride on the Royal Enfield Himalayan, or for that matter any other motorcycle, because motorcycle is the epitome of freedom. Especially if you have an inclination towards this kind of stuff. So yep, that's about it from me on this one. We'll come up with a lot of interesting things headed your way. I'm testing out the springs, the fork springs. There's a lot of interesting mods coming happening on the motorcycle. So we'll talk about all that on a later episode. For now, this is Ben signing out. Ciao.